There's a particular sort of silence in Westminster when a name drops out of circulation. Not the loud kind, not the theatrical "we've fallen out" sort of silence. The more lethal version, the one where the name simply stops appearing on guest lists, stops being raised in corners, stops being useful to anyone who likes their politics tidy and their alliances deniable. It's the same silence you hear when a minister is taking time with family and everyone politely pretends not to notice the removal men outside the department. That, in essence, is the story now drifting around London's softer power set, the bits of the capital where politics, culture, money, and reputation all sit at the same table and pretend it's for entirely separate reasons. The talk is that Meghan Markle hasn't been publicly rejected by the luxury fashion world so much as quietly placed at arm's length. Not with statements, not with a dramatic "we're parting ways," but with the sort of calm, administrative distance that tells you the decision has been made and nobody is interested in arguing about it. If you've spent any time watching how the establishment actually works, you'll recognize the method. Institutions rarely swing a hammer when they can close a door without making a sound. The polite version is always, "Unfortunately, it won't be possible." The real version is, "You are no longer worth the trouble." Balenciaga is the name most often attached to this particular whisper. The claim, repeated by people who talk as if they've seen the calendar and the seating plan, is that the brand has decided it doesn't want her at its shows, doesn't want the association, and doesn't want the circus that tends to arrive 5 minutes after she does. No fanfare, no feud, just absence. In high-end fashion, that absence is the whole message. You don't get told you're banned, you simply find out you're not expected. Now, before anyone starts demanding a sworn affidavit from the front row at Paris Fashion Week, it's worth saying this plainly. None of this comes with official confirmation, and that's rather the point. The people who run luxury houses don't do moral crusades in public. They do risk management in private. They don't shout, they adjust. And if the adjustment is real, the logic is brutally familiar to anyone who's watched political parties handle difficult figures. The allegation is that Meghan has become, for certain brands, an unpredictable headline generator. Not the helpful sort, not the glamour and aspiration sort that sells handbags and perfume. The sort that drags the brand into a week-long argument about the Duchess, the Monarchy, the culture wars, and whatever fresh grievance is trending that morning. What's being suggested, essentially, is that the conversation stops being about clothes the moment she's in the room. The collection becomes background music, the show becomes a set, the photographs become a referendum. And in a business that prides itself on control, that is intolerable. Luxury is theater, yes, but it's tightly rehearsed theater. Nobody wants an unscripted heckler wandering onto the stage. That sensitivity is apparently heightened by the fact that certain brands have, in recent years, taken a bruising on the reputational front. When you've already been through your own public relations inferno, you don't invite fresh sparks near the curtains. You become cautious. You become conservative, ironically enough, even if your clothes look like they were designed during a power cut. So the suggestion is not they dislike her. It's colder than that. It's that they fear the uncontrollable story that follows her. And fear, in these circles, is an excellent organizer. One of the more interesting parts of this chatter is how it's framed as a pattern, not a one-off snub. People who repeat it don't point to a single moment where the axe fell. They point to a trail of non-events, invitations that never came, doors that didn't open, regions that didn't roll out their usual red carpet. The Gulf is frequently mentioned in this regard because the Gulf is where you go when you want a certain kind of international legitimacy and a certain kind of photographed welcome. It's where reputations get polished, sometimes literally. And the line doing the rounds is that the warmth simply didn't appear. Dubai, we're told, didn't materialize into the kind of embrace that normally suits everyone's interests. Saudi, another master of carefully curated partnerships, reportedly showed no appetite either. In the world of money and monarchy-adjacent celebrity, a lack of interest is a signal in itself. It's not always personal, it's often arithmetic, but it travels. What happens next, according to the people who trade in this sort of information like it's a second job, is that other gatekeepers begin to reassess. Fashion houses talk, sometimes directly, often through stylists, fixers, publicists, and the discreet intermediaries who seem to know everyone but never quite have a job title. When one market steps back, others begin to wonder why, not out of moral panic, out of self-preservation. It's the same instinct you see in Westminster when a donor becomes awkward. One person quietly returns a call a little later than usual, then another decides it's not the right time, and eventually the awkward donor is still rich, but no longer invited to sit quite so close to the front. Nobody announces it, everyone understands it. If you want a single image of how this sort of exclusion works, there's an anecdote being passed around about Monaco. Monaco, for those who like their symbolism neat, is not Hollywood. It's not even London. It's a place that runs on rules, understatement, and the firm belief that the less noise you make, the better you look. The story goes that there was an attempt to secure private access at a Balenciaga boutique there, the kind of VIP accommodation that would have once been routine, and that the answer was an immovable no. Not rude, not dramatic, just final. Is the Monaco story true? I don't know. And neither do most of the people repeating it, but it has the right flavor to spread because it fits the larger picture being painted. Not a chaotic public feud, but a consistent message delivered quietly across borders. And consistency is what turns a rumor into a perceived reality. Some people close to the Sussex operation, according to the same whisper network, took that sort of refusal badly. Not because of shopping, obviously, but because it removes the last comfortable excuse. If you can tell yourself you missed an invite due to scheduling, you can keep your dignity intact. If you are calmly told, across multiple settings, that the answer is simply no, you are forced to confront the thing no brand, no palace, and no politician enjoys confronting. You've lost access. And access in the modern reputation economy is half the currency. The other half is the appearance of being wanted. There's also an argument floating around that this isn't just about fashion, it's about a wider cooling, an odd synchronized backing away across sectors that once flirted with the idea of Sussex stardom as a safe bet. Entertainment executives, the sort who don't mind controversy as long as it sells, are said to have become more cautious. Projects that were once in discussion have allegedly drifted into the foggy land of "we'll circle back" and never quite returned. Again, none of this is on the record. It rarely is. Hollywood doesn't announce that it's lost interest. It simply stops answering emails. Westminster doesn't announce that it's bored. It simply starts looking at its phone when you speak. So why does any of this matter to British politics, beyond the national hobby of arguing about Meghan Markle as if she's standing for Parliament? Because the monarchy is part of the country's political weather system, whether ministers admit it or not. And because the Sussex story has become a proxy battleground for deeper questions about establishment power, accountability, and the limits of personal reinvention. It's also because the British state, at its most instinctive, prefers containment to confrontation. When institutions decide someone is troublesome, they don't always go to war. They let the person shout into a void. They wait. They deny oxygen. They rely on the fact that attention is finite and silence is a kind of gravity. If this luxury freeze is real, it would be a perfect example of that. Not an attack, not a public dressing down, but a withdrawal of the thing that made the person valuable, the sense that they are still inside the room where status is manufactured. And here's where the Westminster perspective becomes revealing, because MPs, particularly the ones with a taste for gossip and a low tolerance for earnestness, have been watching the Sussex saga for a mix of amusement and irritation for years.
Some MPs insist off the record that the whole thing has been a gift to the government of the day, whichever party happens to be in charge, because it reliably distracts the public and the press from more serious failings.
The rumor mill suggests that this is precisely what spooks the luxury world. Not the noise, but the unpredictability of what the noise produces. If your brand exists to sell controlled aspiration, you do not want your front row seat turning into a global argument about family estrangement, monarchy, American culture wars, and the lingering suspicion that everyone involved is a little too keen on the camera. And once the suspicion hardens, it spreads. Gatekeepers start thinking like gatekeepers. They look for the safest path. They don't ask, is she right? They ask, will this be a headache? Now, there's a further layer to this story that Westminster types love because it involves a split. The gossip, carefully worded, is that Prince Harry has been shifting his posture, not dramatically, not with some tabloid-friendly separation announcement, but with small signals, fewer joint appearances, more solo ventures, a slightly different tone. People who claim proximity to the situation talk about him behaving less like a man charging forward and more like a man trying to limit damage. Is that true? Perhaps, perhaps not, but it's plausible enough to keep the salons talking because it maps onto a familiar dynamic, the partner who wants to fight and the partner who wants to survive. Westminster has seen it in political marriages, in leadership teams, in every office where two people thought they were building a shared project until the project began to bite. Those who sympathize with Harry will tell you he has always been caught between worlds, and that the last few years have been an extended experiment in what happens when you try to live off the fumes of royal status while publicly denouncing the system that produced it. Those who dislike him will say with a shrug that he made his choices loudly, repeatedly, and on camera, and that institutions with long memories do not reward betrayal with open arms. And that, in political terms, is the core question. Can you walk away from a court, denounce it, profit from describing it, and then quietly attempt to edge back into its protection when the outside world becomes colder? How often does that work in Westminster, where yesterday's colleague becomes tomorrow's rival, and the grudges are filed as neatly as the meeting notes? There are mutterings, too, about attempts to reopen channels in Britain being met with the kind of steady frost that doesn't melt. Palace responses, according to those who claim to have heard from those who claim to have heard, are said to be consistent. No drama, no reconciliation arc, no public olive branch. A door closed without slamming, but closed all the same. If you've ever watched how the British establishment handles a rupture, you'll recognize the posture. It's not about anger, it's about precedent. Forgive one very public act of defiance, and you invite more. Allow access after a spectacular breach of trust, and you teach everyone else that loyalty is optional. The palace, like any ancient institution, thinks in decades. It can afford to wait out a news cycle. It can afford to let someone else tire first. So if the fashion world is indeed stepping back, it would simply be echoing that institutional instinct. Reduce risk, remove unpredictability, keep control. What's striking about this moment, if we accept even half of the whispers as broadly accurate, is the sense of a broader consensus forming. Not a conspiracy, not a coordinated takedown, but something subtler. Multiple powerful ecosystems arriving at the same conclusion independently. That's not unheard of. In politics, it happens when a leader's grip goes. One newspaper turns, then another, then donors get jumpy, then MPs begin looking at the exit signs. Nobody has to plot it. The logic spreads on its own. And in that sense, the most plausible explanation for the freeze-out story is also the least dramatic, a slow recalculation of value. A few years ago, Meghan's proximity to royalty offered brands a kind of modern glamour with a progressive sheen. It was new, it was global, it came with the suggestion of relevance.
Over time, the sheen has been smudged by constant argument, constant counter-argument, constant performative outrage from all sides. The glamour becomes contested, the relevance becomes exhausting. At that point, luxury houses do what luxury houses do. They retreat to safety. They choose the least noisy association. They pick people who will wear the dress and not become the entire story. And yes, there's an irony here that even the most disciplined courtier would struggle not to enjoy. Meghan's brand, to use the word in its plain English sense rather than its dreadful marketing sense, has always been about breaking free of old structures. Yet the oldest structures have a way of punishing you without touching you. They don't need to argue with you, they just stop needing you. They stop inviting you. They stop calling. Isn't that the real power move? Not confrontation, but indifference. Still, the story has its counter-arguments, and it's worth hearing them, because Britain has never been good at holding two truths in its head at once. Meghan has undeniably been subjected to a level of scrutiny and hostility that veers into obsession. Anyone with eyes can see that. There are people who will never forgive her for marrying into the royal family, and they were furious before she said a word. That hostility doesn't disappear just because gatekeepers start acting cautious. And brands, for all their talk of values, do not operate on virtue. They operate on the public mood. If the mood is sour, they step away. That doesn't prove the criticism was fair. It proves that the criticism has become commercially inconvenient. There's another point, too, that Westminster watchers will appreciate. Sometimes the establishment punishes not wrongdoing, but disobedience. It doesn't always care what you did. It cares that you did it loudly and that you did it without permission. That's why certain figures who behave atrociously can remain welcome if they keep their head down, while others are exiled for the sin of refusing to play the game quietly. So when you hear the whispers of doors closing, it's worth asking, is this a reaction to controversy or a reaction to the refusal to be managed? Is it about reputation or is it about control? And if it's about control, who is really being disciplined here? That's where the UK political angle bites. The Sussex saga has become a kind of public seminar on how soft power works in Britain. Not through laws, not through votes, but through access, acceptance, and the subtle signals of who is still in. It's the same mechanism by which a backbencher becomes a minister, by which a donor becomes a peer, by which a once fashionable idea becomes an embarrassment everyone pretends they never supported. And that, in political terms, is the core question. Can you walk away from a court, denounce it, profit from describing it, and then quietly attempt to edge back into its protection when the outside world becomes colder? How often does that work in Westminster, where yesterday's colleague becomes tomorrow's rival, and the grudges are filed as neatly as the meeting notes? There are mutterings, too, about attempts to reopen channels in Britain being met with the kind of steady frost that doesn't melt. Palace responses, according to those who claim to have heard from those who claim to have heard, are said to be consistent. No drama, no reconciliation arc, no public olive branch. A door closed without slamming, but closed all the same. If you've ever watched how the British establishment handles a rupture, you'll recognize the posture. It's not about anger, it's about precedent. Forgive one very public act of defiance, and you invite more. Allow access after a spectacular breach of trust, and you teach everyone else that loyalty is optional. The palace, like any ancient institution, thinks in decades. It can afford to wait out a news cycle. It can afford to let someone else tire first. So if the fashion world is indeed stepping back, it would simply be echoing that institutional instinct. Reduce risk, remove unpredictability, keep control. What's striking about this moment, if we accept even half of the whispers as broadly accurate, is the sense of a broader consensus